Okay, this is Anna. So yeah, I think this looks good. You basically got everything working correctly. I think that if you wanted to improve it, one thing you can do is move the root side to side a little bit so it's not staying perfectly centered. Another thing you can do is kind of swing the feet out one in front of the other a little bit. Not like he's walking on a tightrope, but just not perfectly parallel either. For the arm swing, if you add a little bit of wrist rotate, that can kind of loosen it up a little bit. But yeah, this looks good. Next up is Dante. So yeah, once again, you've got all the basics working. There's a little bit of a pop in this left leg, so you might want to look at that. It's kind of like a double bounce in that leg. And I think, yes, some improvements you could make are you can have the root move side to side. There's, in general, the root stays centered over the foot carrying the weight. So you'll get a little side to side movement there. And I mean, because you've got the rotation, which is good. Another thing is if you wanted to get a little wrist rotation and maybe a little bit of finger movement can help too, just so they don't look so like mannequin hands kind of, because they're so solidly not moving. So those are a couple areas for improvement, but overall it's looking good. This is Jaemin. Okay, so this is working well. I think it's okay that it's got a lot of up and down movement, but it looks maybe a little exaggerated. I don't know if that's what you want. Um, and yeah, if you wanted to kind of improve this a little bit, you could have a little bit of side to side movement in the root of the character. Normally you keep the root centered over the foot carrying the weight, and you could add a little bit of wrist rotation, and maybe just a little bit of finger movement, enough to kind of keep the fingers alive. But yeah, you've got all the basics in there, so it looks good. Next up is Clive. I like that this one has some character to it. I think it's what's doing that is the sort of like a bow-legged walk going on here, and there's a lot of sort of roll to the foot, and that gives it kind of a funny. He does look like someone who maybe just got off a horse, which I think is good. So yeah, nice work on that. Like I've mentioned on some of the others, you could do a little side-to-side movement on the root, especially on one where he's picking up his feet kind of high and keeping them off the ground. Like on a pose like that, if you freeze there and look at the front view, if you try to hold that pose, you would just sort of fall over to the side. So typically you want to keep things kind of balanced. I mean, an exception to balance is that when you're walking and running, you tend to lean forward. It's like walking is almost like a series of like falling forward and catching yourself. So it's okay to be a little bit off balance facing forward, but from side to side you're usually more balanced, and that would mean in this case if you're lifting up that foot and keeping it off the ground, you would tend to center the root over the foot carrying the weight to keep you more balanced. So that might improve the look of the walk. You might try that if you wanted to put more into it, but it's good. It's got some real character to it, so good job on that. Okay, this is George. I think it looks good. This, if I'm not mistaken, he seems to be kind of leaning a bit to the side. His right, our screen left. It doesn't look quite straight, which is sort of makes me feel like he could fall to the left. I mean, I don't notice in this view so much, but in this one, he seems a little off balance to that side. Good job getting the poncho thing to work well. That looks good. And yeah, his steps are kind of small. I'm wondering if you did that to make sure they didn't intersect the poncho. Um, and yeah, as I mentioned with some of the other ones, you know, if you kind of keep the root centered over the foot carrying the weight, so there's a little side to side, that could be an improvement. Maybe add a little bit of wrist rotation and kind of loosen up the fingers a little bit. Um, but looks good. Next up is Chavez. Like the shotgun thing. Um, Looks like you have a slight issue on the boots there. You might try selecting those vertices and using a hammer skin weights to kind of solve that. Um, the walk looks alright. I think it's working well. It's got some style to it, and some character, so that's good. One of the things I talked about in the other ones is that sort of side to side movement, and it looks like you've got that going on here, so that's good. And yeah, it's a good walk. Nice work. I think that it looks like you're used kind of a low resolution, and also looks like things are kind of squished, like they're stretched in the vertical direction and squished in the horizontal direction. So make sure you're not altering it after you play blast it, because I'm guessing that might have happened when you've assembled the 3 different views. Anyway, but the walk looks pretty good. Next up is Jersey, and yeah, we've got everything working. Once again, you got the basics right. I think if you're looking for areas for improvement, you could have the root move side to side so that it stays more centered over the foot carrying the weight. You could kind of swing one foot a little bit out in front of the other as it goes from front to back. Maybe animate the wrists a little bit so they're not quite so stiff, and maybe a little bit on the fingers as well, just to loosen them up some. But besides that, that's looking good. Next up is Melissa. So yeah, that kind of forward and back movement is maybe a little exaggerated, sort of distracting. Um, but besides that, it's looking pretty good. Um, you could, as I mentioned on some of the others, you could have one foot kind of swing out one in front of the other, and that might work well with his kind of, baggy pants. I like that you've animated the fingers. That's really good to see. There's some nice shoulder movement. The head stays straight, so that's good. Maybe kind of lean him forward a little bit more. So tilt the spine so it's angled forward a little bit, but not too much. I mean, it just kind of works with his character. So yeah, good work on this. This is Zanna. So yeah, it looks like you're just getting started, unless I'm missing something here. So I would say keep going. Let me know if you need any help, but yeah, it looks like you're sort of just getting started. So there's not much to critique here right yet as far as the walk's concerned. And this is Romelo. It looks like you're having some issues here. Kind of freezes after that first step. Also, this arm should be moving with the opposite leg. So when this leg goes forward, this arm goes back, and the other arm goes forward. Let's look at the other view. Okay, this one seems to be working a little bit better, but again, this arm goes forward with the opposite leg, and this one goes, forward with this leg. So you need to reverse those. And then maybe make sure the feet get flat on the ground, and maybe kind of correct for the head. By that I mean it's okay for the shoulders to twist, but the face should kind of stay looking forward, straight forward. So you can sort of counter animate the head, like when the shoulders rotate to their most extreme point, then rotate the head straight, and then when they go to the opposite extreme, rotate the head straight and again, and you'll keep that head straight while he's walking, because it's kind of weird that his head turns with his bodies, although I can see that you have his eyes locked forward, which is good. Yeah, so keep going on that.